Earth was in ruin. Human society had been destroyed when giant beetles came out of nowhere worldwide. They devoured people on the streets, and no amount of gunfire and nuclear warfare could stop them. People panicked, bunkered into their homes where they either left and were eaten, or they starved to death. The beetles cut off the water supply, leaving humans in their homes thirsty, dehydrated, desperate enough to make stupid choices. The rich were unfazed. The poor were of no interest to them. The politicians, the monarchs, the dictators all fled to safety. They took to their bunkers with their families, letting the poor die and the insects starve. It didn't matter to them. As they delved into secret spaces with sealed doors, they found themselves undisturbed, like the insects couldn't stop them, or that they didn't want to. Humanity cheered deep in the bunkers. The doors were resealed for another 10 years, and the festivities started. The beetles didn't even try to enter. They didn't need to. People were too busy panicking to think. Think about how beetles spent their larval years underground. People started vanishing in the bunkers. People tried to escape, but knew that they would die either way. Humanity quickly fell, and in the bunkers, the beetle larvae fed. There once was a hill that ate people. The rabbit's grandmother told him never to go near it. So the rabbit went to the hill and shouted, "Gobble-knoll, swallow me. Come devour me." But Gobble-knoll knew the rabbit and took no notice. Later that day, a group of travelers came by looking for a place to shelter from the rain. And Gobble-knoll opened his green and ferny lips, and the travelers thought that they had found a cave. They went in, and the rabbit slipped close behind them. But the hill felt hairy pads on his tunnels, and before the rabbit could reach the middle, Gobble-knoll threw him out and the grass shut. The rabbit went and hid behind a tree, and a few days later a hunting party arrived at the hill just before night. And Gobble-knoll opened again. This time, the rabbit used magic art and took the shape of a man, except for his ears, which he tucked down his shirt so they wouldn't brush against the roof and make Gobble-knoll sneeze. He went down long and hurried passages until he came to the hill's stomach, and there were the remains of all the victims and some who were not yet dead. "Hey, hey, hey," shouted the rabbit. "Why don't you eat? You leave the best. Here's a delicious heart. What's wrong with that?" Gobble-knoll set up a dismal howling, for it was his own heart that the rabbit had seen. And the rabbit knew this and took out a knife and stabbed the hill dead. The ground split, and the blue sky lit the deep hollows. And the living came out and wept before the rabbit and wanted to give him power and riches. But all the rabbit would take was Gobble-knoll's fat, and he went home with it on his back. And he and his grandmother were thick to bursting from it for many a day. I have to take this nice and slow. I have to choose my words carefully. I don't want to make this worse for me. Something's happened this past week to the way we talk. I don't know what's causing it or how it's happening. I only know that it's killing people. Innocuous phrases, figures of speech, colloquialisms, and hyperboles are becoming literal, with disastrous results. Most people have stopped talking, but that approach is not helping anymore. The first victim was Old Man Gnome. He always was a talker. He loved to ramble on with old stories and local urban legends to anyone who would listen. It was when he started a conversation with a college student who was too nice to walk away that it happened. Gnome was rambling on about the time he found the Jersey Devil in his backyard. At the crescendo of his long-winded story, he said those fateful words. He said that he was beside himself with shock at finding the legendary cryptid in Spokane when it happened. Gnome screamed in agony as he was attacked by some invisible force and ripped in two. The student could only watch in horror as the bisected man clutched desperately at his severed lower half while he bled out as if he could reattach himself. The people who witnessed Gnome's death called the police, who promptly took the student into custody so he could be interrogated for the possible murder. They changed the boy out of his blood-stained clothes and gave him a gray prison jumper. They interrogated him for 5 hours before the stress, lights, and questions broke him. In his frustration, he said something about how the uncomfortable jumper was killing him. The jumper then constricted tight around him. He flailed around the room trying to tear the attacking clothes off, but they were too tight and coiled around him. The police officers could only watch as the jumper shrunk to the point of crushing his bones and organs until the student died. When they cut the clothes off of him to try and make sense of what had happened, They found that the seams of the prison jumper had actually cut into him, bruised him in places, and completely compressed his lungs into a pulpy mess. It didn't take long for people to make the connection between their words and the results. Many stopped talking, but a few spoke out on how to protect yourself from this phenomenon. They explained that it only affects the speaker. You can't kill other people with your words except in certain situations. One woman joked with a friend that she always assumed she would go out with a bang. The resulting explosion killed 4, crippled 1, and severely burned 5 people. Your words will always be turned against you. One man boasted that he wanted to die drowning in lady parts and found himself swarmed and smothered by a horde of oddly clingy cats. It's gotten worse. It's no longer restricted to spoken word. It's spread onto written messages. I was texting with a friend, trying to understand what was happening when he, always a defeatist, said he was screwed 6 ways till Sunday due to his tendency to talk. From what I hear, he died of severe exhaustion, dehydration, and physical shock after removing his genitals with a pair of scissors and using them on himself. Soon it'll spread to our thoughts and then we're all dead. I'm writing this because I am dying. Slower than the others, but dying nonetheless. I just wanted it to end in the nicest way possible. I said I wanted to die with a smile on my face. I thought that would be harmless, dying happy. It didn't work. Please let me die. My face is paralyzed in a grin. I can't eat, I can't talk. I can't even scream in agony at this perpetual smile burning my muscles. I just want this to end.